I sit on the board. Thank you so much, Anne. My name is Cindy Ogana. I sit on the board of Kenya Association of Fundraising Professionals. We are a governing body of resource mobilizers and fundraisers within Kenya and the region. What we do is we champion ethical fundraising through capacity building sessions, such as the one that we're having now. They are monthly and they're virtual. They're called coffee talks. And now that you're here, we are so excited that we're going to get more people engaged, because in the field that we're in, we learn from each other, we learn from networking, and we learn from observing trends. So that is what we do. We have trainings that we do that are bespoke and touch on specific areas, because the fundraising landscape is very wide. There are those who deal with community-based organizations, international NGOs. It's really different. So we try and tailor-make some of our fundraising. For example, coming up in May, we have our public sector fundraising. So if you're in the public sector, especially in Kenya, it's interesting to know that, to note that in April, we'll have our, in May, we're going to have our public sector fundraising. In partnership with the Resource Alliance, we have the IFC pop-ups, which is part of the IFC Congress, International Fundraising Congress that happens every year in Netherlands. Courtesy of our partnership with the Resource Alliance, we have a specialized version of it that is digital, where you get to learn from international players. And we're so excited that this will be the 3rd year that we'll have our IFC, actually the 5th year, if we add from the time we started. We'll have our IFC pop-ups, a small tailor-made version of the IFC Congress that happens in the Netherlands. And we do have our keynote speaker, Vileke, who will touch on that. We are a membership association. We encourage all our members to join in, to plug in, to enjoy the products that we give at discounts, at discounted rates. Our biggest key product that we offer, because everyone is like, how can I ensure that I am an internationally recognized fundraiser? We have the CFRE, which is the international body of examination for fundraisers, and you get to be certified courtesy of KAFP and our partnership with CFRE. You can be CFRE executive if you sign up with KAFP. Because of our partnership, you get them at discounted rates. There's lots to discuss. Time is not on our side, but I cannot begin without introducing our amazing team at KAFP. I'll start with our secretariat, and you could introduce yourself, and then you'll introduce your other member, and then I'll introduce our founding trustee. Go ahead, Anne.
Hello, good morning, and thank you for joining us for the January Coffee Talk. My name is Anne. I'm the secretariat lead at the Kenya Association of Fundraising Professionals, and I'm joined by my colleague Brenda. I can't introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. Hi, good morning. My name is Brenda Wirimo. I am the Marketing and Comms Coordinator at KFP. It is so lovely to see all of you here. Thank you so much for everyone who registered. We're really hoping you're going to love and gain from this discussion. Please do not forget to introduce yourself on the chat box. And yeah, enjoy your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Brenda. And it's my honor and privilege to now introduce our founding member who ensured that all this happened. Mike, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you so much, Cindy. My name is Mike Muchilwa. I am the founder of the Kenya Association of Fundraising Professionals, long-term chair. Stepped down in 2020 during COVID, but not because of COVID. Yeah, glad to see this sustainable organization going, and it's kept going by all of you. It's not donor supported, it's member supported. And the coffee talk, which was an idea we came up with in our campus days, but it's still going. Thank you so much, Cindy, in the interest of time.
Thank you so much, Mike. For some reason, your camera was not working.
Camera is down. I need to fix it, yeah.
Yes, why the mystery, but that is fine. People can definitely in the chat. So we are really honored and privileged to have our moderator for this session, who's going to introduce our panelists. And I am scrolling through, there we go. Our moderator for this session, who's going to introduce our panelist. Enatak, she's a principal consultant grounded in equity. For those who came in earlier, she mentioned that she was in Chicago, which is very cold. And I don't know what the time difference is, but Christine, we are so humbled and touched that you have taken time to be in our midst and to moderate this very important session. So Christine is a US-based international philanthropic strategist with over a decade of executive leadership experience. She is a chartered advisor in philanthropy. She partners with both grassroots and global organizations to build sustainable, equity-informed fundraising strategies. She is definitely the lady for the job, and we're so excited to have you here. So Christine, please go ahead and take it away.
Thank you so much, Cindy. Thank you very much to the Kenyan Association of Fundraising Professionals for having each and every one of us this morning. We are truly honored to be in this intercultural, international gathering to share our experiences, but more so to learn from each other and be able to come up with strategic solutions to what we are seeing in our sector in today's time. So without further ado, it's a great honor to introduce the panelists, starting with Ms. Vilikie Van Rijn. So sorry, Vilikie, if I have mispronounced your name, I apologize. But Vilikie is a global leader in social impact and the CEO of the Resource Alliance, the organization behind the world-renowned International Fundraising Congress. With a background that includes leading strategy and analysis for SOS Children's Villages International and consulting in emerging markets like Mexico, she currently oversees a global community of over 30,000 changemakers. She is a leading voice on the future of fundraising, focusing on how NGOs can move beyond traditional aid to build resilient, values-led funding ecosystems. Welcome. Next, we have Beatrice Karanja. Beatrice is the Executive Director of Nature's Pitch and Tusk Trust trustee. Beatrice is a seasoned strategic communication specialist and conservation philanthropist with 25 years of experience in African development. A former journalist with the BBC and Reuters, she has worked with international giants like UNICEF, Oxfam, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Beatrice is a trustee of the Tusk Trust and a judge for the Tusk Conservation Awards. She also serves as chair of the board for the Mara Elephant Project. She is a fierce advocate for African-led innovation and the intersection of nature, finance, and development. Welcome, Beatrice. Next up is Harvey Duthie. He is the CEO and funder of Belmont Fundraising. Harvey is a premier international fundraising strategist who has personally led initiatives that raised over 200 million euros for global causes. Based in Europe, his 20-year career includes serving as CEO of the University of Limerick Foundation and designing global fundraising plans for the Gates Foundation and the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization in Rome. His expertise spans major gifts and campaign design for education, health, and faith-based organizations across the UK, Europe, and Africa. Welcome, Harvey. Last but certainly not least, Allwell Ahigbe. Allwell is a co-founder and CEO of Travail Ensemble. Allwell is a Lagos-based nonprofit business development specialist and a leading voice in the Shift the Power movement in West Africa. He holds an MBA from Nexford University and a master's in peace and conflict studies. Through his firm, Travail Ensemble, he helps African NGOs democratize access to international funding by bridging language and structural barriers. He has a track record of mobilizing over 10 million for social $10 million for social impact and specializes in institutional resilience and sustainable donor strategies. Welcome, everybody. We are going to get started this morning. We all know that in the current climate and philanthropic global ecosystem, that there are various challenges that we are facing in resource mobilization that we would like to start discussing this morning. I'd like to start with Viliki in discussing the hidden challenges that you are seeing, not only in your immediate experience, but that which you feel has global implications for which you find people are having hardships in addressing at the moment. Viliki?
Thanks. Thanks very much, everyone, and good morning, good afternoon, where you're dialing in from. My name is Willeke van Rijn, and it's really a pleasure to see you all here, and thanks for having me. What we see coming out of our global community from across the globe are a couple of big topics. I think we see a differentiation where organizations are actually saying at the moment, if we have reduced our funding, we need to kind of reorganize ourselves and keep on doing the same, but with less funding and often with less staff. I think if we stay in that kind of paradigm, we are really going to lose the battle because the funding that has been cut is not coming back. If you look at the ODA funding, the $100 billion that has left, if we see the shifts towards defense mechanisms at the moment, it is not returning, definitely not over the short time frame. So we really have to look at an overhaul, not only within our organization, but specifically within our community, and really move back to purpose. And that brings me to the second point, and that is around if we are really focusing on surviving our logo instead of working towards our purpose, there we have a very big issue. Save the Children is not the only one saving children, and with all due respect, Save the Children alone cannot save all the children. We need to work there together. And then I think a third one is, of course, this brings a lot of emphasis, maybe more internally. There are a lot of things that we can address, but I would like to not to take all the time. Another thing internally that we really need to have a look at is we see still in organizations that resource mobilization and fundraising is an aftermath. Here we have a strategy, we have developed a strategy, and then there's actually said, can somebody please raise the required amount for it? And what does that really mean? And often that means that is allocated either to a dedicated fundraiser or it is half the job of the CEO. And the question is, how much is resource mobilization really ingrained within the organization? Does everyone understand resource mobilization? Is everyone part of the resource mobilization element? Is resource mobilization not the starting point, but part of the starting point when you are developing a new strategy? And we really see the big successes from organizations who can adapt in changes and circumstances that are happening and coming towards us at this moment. Is actually the ones that have strong leadership and board representation with resource mobilization expertise in it. And it doesn't always mean that a board member has to be a fundraiser, but for example, somebody who has the networks that can open the doors at the right level. It's a non-negotiable at the moment. And we see that across the globe that is still not happening. So I really want to start with those three, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I most appreciated what you mentioned about resource mobilization not necessarily being the starting point. Allwell, would you like to expand upon that as to where you believe or you see the most ideal starting point? And I want to say starting point because based on the dramatic shifts that we have experienced in the sector, especially in the last fiscal year, a lot of people have to regroup, reset, and find a new starting point. What does that new normal seem to look like in your experience, whether you want to address it from a West African standpoint or a global standpoint as to where nonprofit leaders need to find that new North Star for them to move forward?
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Kristen. Great to be here. Totally agree with what Vileke has just said. This is the new normal, and we have to find a way to proceed with purpose, with direction. I recall that when COVID disrupted everything, we just hoped that COVID would bounce back after COVID. and we'll find a way to be able to get back to how things were before. So even though we saw a number of innovation coming in from across the continent during COVID, but when everything began to pipe down from 2022, we all just kind of went back to reset button and continued the way we were, instead of trying to diversify, instead of trying to try out new opportunities for resourcing our organizations. And now the rug has been pulled off our feet. So what I see as the opportunity here is an opportunity to start with this clean slate and use that as a springboard towards looking internally within Africa to find African resource mobilization techniques that can help us continue delivering impact for our people. So in terms of where I think the starting point should be, it should be from local philanthropy, our ability to galvanize the public generally to buy into our cause and to be able to support us in one way or the other to achieve our mission. So this would include getting closer to your supporters, getting closer to your beneficiaries and local stakeholders, and offering them an opportunity to contribute through monthly giving, individual giving programs, for instance, and then enabling them to have a stake in the work that you're doing. But moving beyond just monthly individual giving programs that kind of target the masses, we need to begin to tap into the local high net worth individual opportunities that exist within the country. I mean, within Africa. That's something that's often overlooked. Africa has a lot of billionaires and multimillionaires that are really interested in giving back to the society. They are really interested in finding a way to support, to help us navigate these challenges that we all face. So a couple of months ago, an INGO reached out to me, and they had gotten to their wits' end, doing a lot of work around social behavioral change communication. And what they wanted to do was see if there were opportunities within Nigeria for them to tap into to be able to diversify their funding. So what we did was look internally, use local networks, get referrals to high net worth individuals in Lagos and in Abuja, and then also tap into the opportunities that corporate foundations have internally. We did that for a while, found a way to cultivate relationships, and surprisingly, we're able to catalyze a funding pipeline of more than $3 million for that INGO to take advantage of locally within Nigeria, instead of having to go on looking for funding opportunities to apply for. If they hadn't made the choice that, hey, we wanted to look inwards, we wanted to see what is available here, that pipeline will never have materialized at all. So I think we get started from there, and then there's so much more we can do in terms of our companies, reaching out, taking advantage of corporate social responsibility, and then also running social enterprises. But I could share more about that going forward. But I think we need to start inwards from individual giving and tapping local high net worth individuals. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Allwell. I really appreciate your perspective and the mindset shift that you're promoting, that within the African continent, we are not only recipients of philanthropic aid, we can actually mobilize within the continent and actually be our own help, as it were, essentially. I saw a lot of nods enthusiastically from Beatrice, so I know she has some great talking points already. Beatrice, talk to us about how we can add on another layer of mobilization from what Allwell discussed to shift and bridge the cultural gaps we may have in the work we are doing in philanthropy between the global South and North.
And
What I mean, what I mean specifically is, how can we help those of our audience members who, as they galvanize and as they mobilize resources in their local ecosystems in their countries, they can also be able to present the same data in a way that it translates to international funds at a time where things are scarce and relationships are harder to even strengthen right now, because there is kind of, Hunger Games going on with international funding.
Thank you, Christine. Yeah, no, I can't echo and reiterate enough what Wilke and Orwell have said. And I think it's so important that as Africans, we do look inward and we look towards ourselves. We are on a continent which has $2.5 trillion in liquid assets from high net worth individuals, and we've got 65% projected growth in Africa for African millionaires. So the rise of millionaires growing. So the untapped potential is, if I can say the word, it's obscene. It's quite, it's there to be grabbed, and it's also quite mammoth. I think in addition to what Orwell has said and what we are, which is a big ethos of ours at Nature's Pitch, is to find the funding on the continent or outside and match that funding. So if you go to an international donor, you say, okay, we're looking to raise 25,000. You come up with half of it, the other half of it will come from Africa, or vice versa. And I think that really brings up a collaborative and respectful a process and a co-created process, because what we still, there's some things from the global north that we can still learn from, appreciate. They've been on this journey for longer than we have in the traditional philanthropic way. We've been doing it Ubuntu Tuma M-Pesa kind of way. But so how do we bring those two pieces together? And then also what I think is so fundamental, and Orwell touched on this, is giving the opportunities for Africans to donate. When you go on to a lot of the donate pages for, larger, whether it's the Leviathan or the mid-sector NGOs, it's all credit cards or bank transfers. We flex our money differently. We flex our money through M-Pesa, through, faith-based networks, through all of that. So how, again, do we make it relevant, relatable, doable, and actionable for Africans on the ground to say that they also have a right, they have a role to play in the advancement of their continent and of the social justice and social good being done on their continent. And I mentioned, I wrote a LinkedIn post a while ago, or 2 weeks ago, and I talked about how I mentioned Kenyans for Kenya. We raised, at that time, it was $1 million in 24 hours. So it is possible. It is absolutely possible. So my takeaway for everybody is, let's really start looking internally, but also not kind of throwing our global north sisters and brothers out it's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. No, you don't do that. Let's bring them into our world, show them this is how we flex, this is how we roll, how can we get work together? And I think that's where be agile and it will be 100% more impactful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Beatrice. Much appreciated. I think it's only right that from the viewpoint of having shared vested interest in our fundraising practices and having some sort of ownership in what we are raising locally, regionally, or within the continent, and asking for matches is just as important as promoting peer-to-peer fundraising. Harvey, I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about what your experience is showing you in your work internationally, that global north investors, and I use that word very deliberately because donors are investing in a mission and they're investing in the impact of the work of our organizations. Talk to us a little bit more about what we need to show as African NGO leaders and African mobilizers, as it were, fundraisers, what we need to show so that those that are looking to invest can see a return on investment in their donations and see a great pathway for legacy in the work that we are doing.
Thank you, Christine. Good morning, everybody. And thank you for inviting me back. It was actually, I think, 2 years ago, I spoke on one of these breakfast briefings, and you were already talking about a lot of this stuff already. So it's not that we're proposing anything different. I think that it's just the landscape has changed much faster. So, quite often you have a chance to kind of sit back and think and bring your board with you and try and convince your CEO that resource mobilization is important and that they should prioritize it. And instead of having that luxury of time, I think what's happened over the last maybe 18 months in particular is that global funding at a macro scale has fallen off a cliff. So there's this new reality in front of all of us, and where we've had that little bit of luxury of time in the past, we just don't have it anymore. So nothing I think you're going to hear this morning is different to what you were already doing. And I think, collaborations, partnerships, impact, scale. Again, I think probably on previous coffee calls, you have spoken about all of these things. But I think really now the fire is at everybody's feet. We have to do this. So I'm working with clients in Uganda, London, Italy. And I think the thing that I would advise is that while the landscape is not wonderful, there's not a lot that you can do about the wider landscape. That's it. And what my advice always is to everybody is focus on what you can control. So what are the things within your organization, within your team, that you have the ability to influence? So how well you tell your story, how much you collaborate. I loved at the start of this conversation, you were being encouraged to figure out who on the call might be useful to you, or vice versa. What are those opportunities in Africa? So again, I used to be in Ethiopia every month, and the same thing, that was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and all of this was being talked about in the past. We should partner better, we should be more efficient, and then COVID hit. And keep in mind that all of this has airs or flavors of the 2008 financial crisis or crash, and everybody was like, it's the end of the world. But the organizations that took a measured response, so they stood back and said, okay, what can we actually control? We can control our story. We can control how well we engage with our donors, how well we report on the impact, how well we cut costs and focus on impact. So I think what I'd suggest is don't panic. I think it's very easy for somebody externally to say don't panic when your numbers are down 20%. But I think if you do panic and you don't focus on those things and you worry instead of act, I think the landscape is going to be a lot worse. And again, I think the group maybe had a blog post that I shared about a week ago, just thinking about what came out of Davos. Everybody was like, oh, crises around the world, they'll all go to Davos and everything will be fine. And that was never going to be the case. And that isn't what happened. But it reiterated everything you're hearing. So if you listen to any of the speakers in Davos, any of the big Geneva meetings where people are coming together, the UN General Assembly, whenever that was, October, November time, they're saying the same thing. We have less money, so you as fundraising organizations, and I'm conscious there's a huge array of organizations on here this morning, you have to collaborate better. You have to demonstrate impact. You've got to be able to demonstrate scale. So I think if you sit back and go, our small little organization is enough, and that's probably not the landscape. So I think you need to be actively looking for what is that extra angle to add value to your proposition. So hopefully that's a useful starting point, but I think there's a lot of opportunities. And I think if you focus on the pieces that are the challenges, keep those in the backdrop and focus on what are the practical positive things that you can do. I'm happy to take questions about some of that a little bit later, but that's my view at the moment.
Thank you very much, Harvey. You bring up a great point of collaboration versus competition. Viliki, would you like to speak a little bit about how competition shows up in our sector when really it should be activating collaboration, and how the current climate we're in is really very, very fertile ground for collaboration versus competition, although it feels like we are all crabs in a bucket and we are fighting for very limited resources. Please advise our audience on how they can seize the opportunity to collaborate versus to compete.
Thanks, Christine. And I think I want to start there with, if you're saying we are all seem to be compete for resources that are limiting, I think then we are specifically talking around, US funding sources perhaps, or the direct impact from an ODA decline. Our view is that actually resources are not everywhere declining, far from even. We see individuals rising, we see private sector rising. The Asia continent is absolutely booming when it comes to impact investment. On the African continent, we see a lot of new investors really stepping up. The Africa Philanthropy Conference last year in Cairo was really showing so many new philanthropists that really want to focus on creating a financially sustainable system within Africa, and that dependency on sources from external, I think that shift will take a long time. And the question is even, should that always necessarily shift? I mean, is there anything wrong with international aid, and should we keep on supporting international aid? And that really means in all kind of directions. The Indian government has so much income at the moment that they're really thinking about an international aid program. Do we want to stop them to do so? I don't think so. I think it's really a positive sign, actually, when we think about others, because we also know that support is far more than aid. You know, it's creating the soft skills, it's creating partnerships, etc. So that's my first one about, do we really want to stop all the funding from international to other parts of the world? Not 100% sure that is the right approach. Do we have a lot of opportunity? Yes, definitely, and we really can grow much more there. Coming back to your question around competition. So competition is, there is a request for proposal and we receive thousands of reactions to it. That is a very passive way of doing a resource mobilization strategy. You know, you're diversifying your funding sources is far more than reacting to a request for proposal when a funder is aligning with your work. So a more active part would be, where are my potential funders? Who are my income sources that we really could work towards? Where do we find them? And what is there happening locally in my community that we are working with the private sector that is working out there? And yes, you're already mentioning around high net worth individuals locally and regionally as well. So I think the competition part comes a lot when we start reacting to things and all want the same funding from one and the same donor. And it comes also back to the same question that I addressed in the beginning. You know, if that really means then that we all respond to one and the same request for proposal, is there potential there to collaborate over to work against each other? And that needs a reflection internally around, is our logo more important than our purpose? We have worked with a cohort last year of 20 African grassroots organizations, over 14 organizations, and they really started forming networks immediately to do joint and co-created proposals. And that, for a funder, is much more exciting as well. So that's, I don't know, the term collaboration, Harvey, I completely agree with you. We have been talking about it for decades right now. Oh, we have to collaborate, we have to collaborate. I think one thing that Trump has been doing, and don't get me wrong, what Trump has done is far from nice and completely wrong, but he's forcing us to collaborate because we refuse to collaborate. So we are really shaken right now that we have to collaborate because there is no alternative to do so. And I think the whole term competition, we should not use it in the sector. If we are fighting against each other to save children, if we are fighting against each other to end climate change, if we're fighting and competing with each other to end poverty, if we're fighting against each other for gender equity, while we know that everyone is talking about gender equity as well, only 1% of global funding is allocated towards women-led organizations, we are really doing something wrong. So we need to have a very look at ourselves there and open that up and say it's nice to blame maybe Trump that he closed down USAID, but what are we doing ourselves to change that whole behavior around we are actually not allocating our funding in the right way, or we could do more towards purpose.
Absolutely. Excellently put. Thank you so much. That is so good. And Beatrice, I saw your hand come up. So before I move the conversation further, would you like to make a comment?
Yes. Thank you, Christine. And thank you. Okay, that was spot on for me. I think it's also within the value, within the collaboration, I think what should be done or should be really addressed is the value cycle of that collaboration. So when you all come together, you say, okay, where I start, Harvey finishes, where Harvey finishes, Orwell starts. etc. Like, and you figure out your value cycle of impact and what skill set everybody can bring into that value cycle, so you know where you stop and where you start, and then you pass it forward into the next person who can do what they do really well. And I think that's very important, that we all really look at what our skill set is, what we can bring to this collaborative table, and no fear, no favor, say, okay, I'm going to do this, and then I'll hand over to Harvey. And then I'll hand over to, but I think we really need to look at the value cycle of impact, of fundraising, and of collaboration, and use that as an entry point of where we can build together.
Thank you so much, Beatrice. I have a question to the panel from the group chat. Rose Thua would like to ask, Africa is living through an immense growth in private sector foundations and interests from venture capitalist funding startups. What do you see as an opportunity for fundraisers in this disruptive space? Allwell, I'd love for you to take that question.
Thank you. Very exciting conversation thus far. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of opportunities that we can take advantage of in the corporate sector, and also with other novel sources that we haven't talked about. So maybe I'll just say something about that before I maybe zero in on the corporate sector. Kind of like what Harvey said, we have to stop worrying and just get to it. We have to start acting now instead of worrying about the loss we have encountered over the last 18 months. And like Vileke said, the resources are not shrinking. We're simply not looking at where the money is coming through. So if you take remittances alone, for instance, in 2024, Africa got 56 billion US dollars worth of remittances in the entire year. In Nigeria here, we got more than 20 billion. And I think there was something that Mike shared in our KAFP group, where for Kenya, there was more than 650 billion Kenyan shillings, which is about $5 billion. So there is a lot of money coming in, and it's going directly into what people eat, what they drink, clothes they wear, typically going to like family relatives, all of those kinds of things. What I'm doing for one of my West African clients is that we have mapped out diaspora networks in Ghana. I'm from Ghana, Sierra Leone, and Liberia. We're looking at these diaspora networks across the US, across Europe, in the Middle East, Asia. And what we're doing now, what we're going to be doing now over the next 6 months, is looking at first making introductions, making connections with those networks, figuring out the work that my client is doing now and how it connects to what those networks are doing in terms of how they're giving back to the communities across rural areas in those 3 West African countries. And then looking for opportunities for us to say, hey, instead of making this giving back to the community in a very random way, or just making it a lot more family-oriented, there is a way for your money, your remittance that's coming down into the country. There's a way for it to be stretched. There's a way for it to be a lot more strategic in terms of the impact you want to make. I'm sure you want a lot more, an overall higher quality standard of living for the entire community, not just for your family. Because if it's something that's going to your family alone, then it doesn't really benefit even the family itself. What they prefer is structural change within those areas. And those are the ideas where those are the things that NGOs are working on. So what I think as a way to kind of take advantage of these kinds of opportunities is that we need to really reimagine what we understand by resource mobilization. We need to start thinking about it in terms of business development. And maybe this is something that comes from my background in sales and marketing and also my business degree. But broadly speaking, across the African NGO fundraising landscape is still the whole idea of give and take, the whole idea of begging more or less somebody to support you. And I like what you said, Christine, when you said it's about investments. That's what those global North donors are doing. They're investing when they give you the aid, but you think it's charity. So we need to find a way to make a case to create something out of nothing. Anybody telling you about alternative funding models, there's no grant application you apply to get alternative funding, to get funding from alternative donors. No, there wasn't an opportunity before. You have to be creative about what you have and understand your purpose of what you're trying to do now and figure out how what you do can connect towards the alternative donor that we're all talking about, whether it's a high net worth individual, whether it's a company, whether it's a diaspora network. You have to be able to build those linkages and then make a case for you getting the resources from them. And those kinds of resources are the best because they are unrestricted. They cover your operating costs. They are much more long-term. if you get in bed with a company or a diaspora network, they're unlikely to change you after 2 years or ask you to submit another call for proposals, because they would rather not change a working alliance. They would rather not change something that is working. So even the funding that we're all focused on, the grant funding, it's something that's highly limited, highly restricted, and something that prevents us from really making real change in the community. So on the other hand, like right now, we have been forced into rethinking what we do, but we also have to start with the mindset and also the approaches of how we go about looking to mobilize resources. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Allwell. Very, very well put. And the questions are continuing to roll in the chat. Please, Harvey, yes, I see your hand.
Yeah, Christine, I just like to add one more thing. And
Yes,
I
please.
think a lot of us don't think enough about from the other side of the conversation. We think about what is required to get a little bit of feedback.
Please, can we mute our mics, please, so that our panelists can be afforded the courtesy to speak with, okay, thank you very much. Okay, Harvey, you can proceed.
Yeah, I just want to add a couple of lines to that from Allwell. I think we need to think what the other side of the conversation requires. So we talk about partnerships, but I see it time and time again with my clients. They think partnership means that they get the money, and that's not the reality. So I worked with a university a number of years ago, and we had a cancer research project. So you would think that that was going to be a no-brainer, that funds would come in. We actually raised no money. In a 3-year period, we raised no money for the cancer research project because we weren't expert enough in it. Others were doing it. We didn't have access to the right people. The building blocks weren't there. But we, in an area where we were completely unknown, software engineering, we partnered with all of the big tech companies who needed tomorrow's future software engineers. So they were like, why are you not teaching software in this way? And if you do it, we'll pay for that. And when we raised no money for cancer research, we raised 10 million euro in 18 months for a new program about software engineering. So like we hit the sweet spot. There's tons of tech companies in Ireland. There's very few expert software engineers, and there was a wide open goal, and we scored. So I think we need to take that step back and go, what's in it for the other side of the conversation that's mutually beneficial for us? And I think we need to be a lot more harsh on ourselves to go, just because I've got a wildlife project that's transformational for the environment, maybe that company doesn't care enough about that thing. So what's the thing that resonates with them? It could be, if it's a new company, local acceptance into the African market. So they might be a lot wider in terms of their remit. If it's banking, what's the thing that's important to them, or data or energy? These big funds, you look at MasterCard, you look at AI. I think, again, coming out of Davos, you look at some of the plans these AI companies have around global health. I've done a lot of work with the Gates Foundation, with Africa CDC. If you look at what the game changers are, they're thinking about how their systems commercially can work better within health systems, but the philanthropy kind of primes that. So if you're in that space, hone in on it, because you may well have, a voice in that conversation. So I really do think we need to be a lot more harsh on ourselves before going forward with these conversations. Because I don't know how many people are on the call now, but 120 people. It's probably, this is just Kenya. Everybody is fishing in the same pond, and I don't mean it from a competition perspective. I simply mean, you all are going to the same funders in the same country about different things, and whoever tells the story best wins. So hopefully that's helpful.
Absolutely, Harvey. Thank you so much. People are resonating with what you're saying. They're commenting in the chat. And actually, there was a question that came through the chat that I wanted to pose to the panel. Edward Gadudi asks, most donors prefer working with social enterprises and private sector when it comes to impact investing. How can civil society organizations, CSOs, prepare and explore impact investment? Who feels well versed to take on that question from Edward?
Shall I kickstart maybe? I think what we
Yes.
hear a lot because, well, one thing about impact investment, what we see happening at the moment is, of course, dependency on one or two or three large donors has never really been successful for any organization because it's too risky. So we see diversifying within fundraising, but now also away from fundraising to new financing models, and impact investment is, of course, one of them. What we sense within the global community across the world actually is that impact investment was not necessarily on the plate of a fundraiser. It was often in the programmatic area, sometimes in the financing area. And I think it's really crucial for every fundraiser in the room that you understand what are these new financing models, and is that something that might fit for your organization or not? A second thing that we see happening is yes, a lot of new, especially younger philanthropists move to impact investment, sometimes also focused on the old traditional charity model of giving a donation is not moving fast enough, and how can we move towards scale? And we see there in certain countries where it requires a new kind of legal setup as a social enterprise to even absorb impact investment, that is needed, but it is really country by country dependent. So we cannot really say, impact investment needs to be in a social enterprise because each country has different kind of legal requirements, how you can absorb your funding and how you're not able to receive your funding. And in certain countries, that means, yes, you need a new legal entity, and in other countries, that's not necessarily required. Also on impact investment, it is not something that fits everyone, which is, I think, in general with fundraising, there is not one size fits all. But if you are an organization that has a capability to go to scale where you can have an upfront investment that you can pull out at a certain moment, and you can start working and creating kind of those models, yes, this might be really a big opportunity. I think where in the past, all our conversations were restricted versus unrestricted funding. At the moment, we go to a kind of a differentiation around what is a grant and a donation versus what requires other kind of financing mechanisms where another financial model might be possible. And that really requires some understanding about, what is in it for us as an organization? Does that work? Is there something possible? And I think there's still a lot of exploring to do as well. So for example, we work with Action Labs where we bring investors and nonprofit organizations together to explore how can we use that new financing models, and impact investment is one of them, as a model so that we really reach many more people and programs and projects instead of the more known one that are working at the moment. So a lot of exploring, but also I think a lot of informing about what is out there.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Would anybody, Harvey Alwell, want to add to that? Okay. One thing that I heard come up was specialization. Viliki even said that what we are working with even impact investment is not a one shoe fits all. There is a question in the chat that I would like to build up to when it comes to specialization and the issue of scaling impact, scaling our mission work without participating in what we call mission drift, which is where you're chasing what a funder's priorities are rather than your mission, vision, and your impact. could one of our panelists talk to us about the value of specialization? Because I know, especially in my client portfolio with the client organizations that have work within the African continent, you find that somebody may start their mission, let's say wanting to feed the homeless, but they end up also educating them. They end up also building a microfinance program. They end up building a women's program and so on. And you find that the organization now becomes a one-stop shop for very many missions in one, when it started with one vision, but they drifted based on where they felt money was coming from. So could you talk to us about specialization, and in the process answer Christelle's question, which was looking at private sector, how can we make this go to scale, because it is still reaching small numbers? So let us associate scaling our impact and specialization, and how that needs to be addressed in order to guarantee sustainability of the impact that we are trying to build with our mission. Who feels they can take that? Harvey, you're already unmuted, so go ahead.
Yeah, I'm very happy to. Unfortunately, this is one that I see time and time again. I have at least 2 clients at the moment where over time they've drifted, and because it's taken a while, they haven't noticed. And I think what happened, particularly in the UK, since COVID, trust income has become far more competitive. There was a spike in hiring, which led to a spike in applications, which made things more competitive. And the issue then is you build an infrastructure of people generally. So, like you say, teaching, advocacy, feeding the homeless, whatever it may be, and then the funding landscape shifts. So I think if there's one takeaway I hear from all the speakers, I think this morning, and I echo this big time, is the need for diversification. And diversification only happens over time. So I've one really challenging project at the moment where the landscape has shifted. There's quite a heavy how would I describe it? Like personnel cost, as in they're just keeping the lights on is quite expensive, and they're eating into reserves, and it's probably taken 24 months to begin to diversify. So I think what we should all be taking away from this is diversification after the fact is too late. So no matter if you're financially comfortable, which is where most people tend to be, with one donor who's loyal to them, but then their priorities shift. So be it a government, a trust, an individual major donor dies, for example, or runs out of money, or shifts their priorities, it leaves you in a really precarious situation. So I think to avoid that kind of, let's call it mission drift, you shouldn't be just chasing the dollars, because the long-term liability on that is much more precarious for your financial sustainability in the long term. So if you're feeding the homeless and you have the potential to do something else, I guess the big question is, should you take that money? And you want to be fairly certain that if you take it, that if you go in that direction, you'll be able to fund it if that funder goes away. Again, it's very difficult one to say. There's been a couple of instances where clients I've worked with or organizations I've been working for, they have said no to funding. So we had to give back at the university €3.5 million, because we got it in our bank account. It still hurts. I'm sure for all of you who are fundraisers, giving money you've raised back at that scale, it makes you shudder. But it was the right decision. We would have had a $3.5 million a year fundraising minus in subsequent years. So 6 years later, that's like 20 million. So the opportunity cost of giving the money back really, really hurt at the time, but it was absolutely the right thing in the long term. So tread carefully if you're diversifying beyond your core mission, and really have your board make those decisions rather than the fundraiser. Fundraiser is going to bite the hand off, in terms of new money. So I guess diversification, and be careful about mission drift.
Thank you, Harvey. And I see you, Alwell. And it's so important to know that there is great integrity that comes in saying thank you for your interest to invest in our organization, but that is not a direction that we have strategically prepared to go. And there's a quote that comes in mind by Ralph Waldo Emerson that says, "The shoemaker makes a good shoe because he makes nothing else." So I'll have you add on what you had in mind to share.
Thank you. And thank you, Javi, for doing justice to the question. So one of my favorite African fundraisers is Michael Kirago, and he's actually here in the call today. And there's something he says, if people can't know you for something, if you're all over the place in so many sectors and all of that, and then people don't know you for something, then you can't expect the donor to really trust you in a way where they can go with you for the long haul, because they do not know if tomorrow you're going to have to change, you're going to change course and get into another sector that you think is a lot more lucrative. And then eventually, even if you were getting some traction, you would only get traction for very little sums of money. Nothing like major gifts that can help transform your work or can help scale your impact, because you're simply all over the place. So while you're trying to diversify your income, you need to be specializing in your mission, in your core mission, and sticking to it, irrespective of the temptations that you would have from trying to branch out into other spaces. If you find that maybe funding is dwindling in that specific sector that you're focused on, maybe there's a lot more competition now for foundations, or government funding has really declined, maybe you should still focus on that mission, but begin to look at how you can mobilize funding from alternative funding sources for that same mission focus that you have, instead of jumping ship. So why don't you try reaching out? Why don't you try mobilizing resources from companies, from high net worth individuals, from local philanthropy, from social enterprises, from diaspora networks, instead, while focused on that mission? The opportunities there, granted, they don't come they're not as clear cuts as let's say responding to a call for proposals, but the long-term opportunities there are endless, and you really can get money that you can use to scale the impact of what you're doing in that same focus area that you are in, instead of jumping ship on what you think is trending with institutional donors. Thank you.
Absolutely, Orwell. And another thing I've also seen to be working, as far as, a lot of us that do this work, I like to call it heart work. We do it because it feeds our heart with the good that we are investing in our communities. So it's no surprise that if you're feeding a population that is starved, that they may also need, let's say, financial literacy. That does not mean you hurry up and establish a financial literacy program when your focus is hunger alleviation. However, that is when you go and find an organization that actually that is their specialty, and you co-write a grant with them, and you work together, and you work them in your funding as a collaborator to bring that needed wraparound service for your population as well. Most likely, if you're in the same region or vicinity geographically, you will find you are serving the same people. You will find that they go to them for financial literacy and how to become a first-time homeowner. They come to you to put food in their pantry, and they go somewhere else to put diapers on their child. That does not mean you need to do all the things. It means that you need some sort of sector awareness about who is doing things that complement and make the lives of your beneficiaries more holistically supported. And if you show that kind of collaboration strategically to funders, they really do.
I think we've lost Christine. Yeah, we've lost Christine, which is fine. I will just give her a moment to bounce back, but really interesting conversations. I was lost with all the amazing nuggets that have come through. As we wait for Christine to log in, allow me to read some of the comments, and then I'll also, if there are any questions, please post, and we can open up the panel to see which of our panelists feels strongly in terms of responding. So Rose Stulo says, I like this discussion on diversification. I agree with Christine. Instead of adding on services and being donor-led work, partner and bring private sector or other local-based nonprofits to serve the need. Write proposals together, stay on your mission, and bring others along the serve emerging needs. I have allow me to put a spanner in the works. That is the ideal. That is the golden standard. But like we've said, and Vileke, you mentioned really well in the beginning, the resources are dwindling and we're all sort of like trying to scramble for the resources. And you are, you're suffering from funding cuts and that affects so much stuff. And there's this grant that's come through and, you're looking for partnerships and you're like, okay, I might be in the education sector, doesn't mean I'm also involved in supply and so on and so forth. What is wrong with, for example, setting up a social enterprise so that you can supply this and then the money then in turn comes in, funds the process? Is that unethical or is that the way to go? I'll ask you to answer that as Christine picks up after Alwa's response. Welcome back, Christine.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Yeah, so I think you run the risk of mission drift if the social enterprise is kind of really far away from like your focus area, the focus area of your nonprofit. I think that you might be dragged in two directions eventually. It's helpful if you generate the income, like you said, but then again, if it's like really something that's diametrically opposed to what you're typically focused on, your typical focus area, I think that it could, first of all, you will need, it could get a lot harder for you to manage both of them because if you're setting up a social enterprise, you probably are not recruiting new staff. You're just putting more pressure on your current overworked and probably underpaid staff that you already have that are working for your NGO. So if they are really stretched in a direction that's totally different from what you're focused on as an NGO, then you might not eventually be doing very good work on your core work, which is really providing those nonprofit services amongst other things. So yeah, I do understand that you might want to be able to cash in on that opportunity. But I think it's helpful if you really work with caution in that respect. Over to you, Vileke and Kristen.
Christine, is it okay if I give a practical example where somewhere it really worked very well on the African continent? Yeah?
Absolutely.
We had what I mentioned, a cohort last year of 20 grassroots organizations. One of them was the Zimbabwe Women Bureau. And they train a lot of women and they do a lot of trainings across the country in Zimbabwe. And by doing so, they actually have assets, meaning they have training rooms available where also people can stay. The women can stay there and they can stay over in the night. And what they decided to do, instead of being continuously dependent on grants, and after 3-year cycles, not being sure if those grants will succeed, they really wanted to look at diversifying their income sources, also away from fundraising to sustainable financing models. And one of the models that they introduced, they said, actually, we are very good at hosting people and doing that hospitality element because we do that already with our trainings and we actually open that up to many others. And that at the moment is their main source of income. So suddenly they created this social enterprise model, which is kind of a profit-creating model, and with hospitality, which is feeding the training parts for the Zimbabwe Women's Bureau purpose. And in this way, I completely agree, you should not kind of shift away from your purpose, but here they really build on what assets do we have already, what expertise do we have already within the organization, and this created a very financial sustainable model, which I think is really to celebrate. And maybe one thing to add towards it, we sometimes see really enterprises or private sector as kind of the black and white, the we are right, they are wrong kind of a thing. I think if we keep that approach happening to work towards purpose, we really need to look with whom we can work together. And of course, there are organizations and due diligence processes that says maybe not, but private sector also could be an extended arm to achieve that purpose. And that really starts, I think, what Alwell is addressing as well. What is your mission? What are you really working towards? And who all are there that could help and support you to achieve it instead of just only kind of you with your team. There are many others there that can help and support you.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for your patience as I was reconnecting to the call. Before I got disconnected, I wanted to pivot us to the technological aspect of the work that we are doing, specifically in terms of AI and technology. Shadrach asked, how do we see technology reshaping donor engagement and resource mobilization? This is especially important when we think about peer-to-peer fundraising and how we see that we need to keep up with the milestones that technology is bringing into our sector. I want to throw it up to the panel to see who feels well-versed to talk about what their experience is showing them as far as the technological sector. Harvey?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in at the start of this. I love tech. I'm a gadget fiend. You should see all the devices that are in front of me here in the office. But the one thing that I urge caution of, and this is coming from a self-confessed, tech nerd, people like the shiny new thing, and AI is the shiny new global thing. So, over the years, there's been tons of them. But unfortunately, it kind of distracts us. It tends to be like AI is going to be a magic bullet. And I think it will be a game changer, but it's not a game changer yet. Now, I've maybe 5 or 6 clients that I work with regularly, and it's from everything from €1 million an organization to $100 million organization, and they're all talking about it, but it's marginal stuff. In the future, we'll be able to do game changer stuff with our databases with AI. But there's an obstacle, GDPR, particularly in Europe, the rules and regulations. You can't just pop your database into ChatGPT. You'll get you'll be in court. But I think it will over time evolve. So I think it will make us more efficient. I think it was a man. I've lost the chat, but somebody was asking about how do I tell a technical story in a compelling way, essentially in part of the chat. ChatGPT and those various AIs can't do that yet, but oh my goodness, can they do a better job than we can quickly? So if you want something distilled, it's wonderful. I would be highly careful, and I don't know if other people disagree with me, about spending a ton of time on this yet. I think everybody needs to be in the loop on it. You can digest big amounts of data quite quickly, but it's not the silver bullet. So if you've lost 20% of your income in 2025, AI isn't going to bring it back up to 100% in 2026. I definitely wouldn't ignore it, but I've yet to see practical examples where it shifts the income dial. And I loved your quote about the shoemaker only makes shoes, that's why he's good at it, or whatever the exact quote was. But I only focus on income generation. So the clients that I work with, we talk about practical strategies to shift the income dial. And I don't think we're there yet with the AI thing. That when I say the AI, I think there's such layers of complexity to it. So maybe there are people on the call who it has changed the game, but apart from maybe drafting a document that would take me a few hours, it takes a few minutes. It definitely can do that. But in terms of actually putting dollars or pounds or euro in the bank, I haven't seen any examples yet. And I'm very happy for people to argue with me, because if you can tell me what they are, then I can steal them. So back to the group.
Yes, and I think what I hear from what you're saying, Harvey, is at the moment, yes, we can utilize technology and AI perhaps to make us more efficient on data and analytics, but it does not and has not yet replaced the value of building relationships, diversifying the relationships we have with funders, and building trust over time, because AI brings an aspect of the microwavable culture into our sector, and any other sector for that matter, where while we all know that in our sector, the greatest success comes with long-term relationship building, trust, and playing the long game. You can be stewarding a funder or a donor for over a year before you make an ask. And I have found this increasingly difficult, especially with convincing some of my client organizations, executive leaders, and board members to come out of Zoom. I tell them, leave your house. When I, connect you with a grant officer, and then you reply to them, please let me know when you're available for a virtual call. I want to scream, get out of your house, get dressed from your waist down, and go and meet somebody for coffee. Like, how many years post lockdown are we, and people are still insisting? You're in the same city. I strategically outlined this funder for you because I know they're within 10 miles of where I know you live, and you still want to Zoom this person? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. This is not how you're going to build a new relationship that is sustainable when you're Zooming your next door neighbor. Absolutely not. Go and take them to coffee. The coffee shops are open, people. The lunch places are open. You should have a budget. I'm even looking at their budgets and I'm like, where is the entertainment budget? They're like, who are we entertaining? Your donors. You need to buy people gifts still. You need to go to the post office and put something in the mail. When you send a grant and you get denied, I tell them all the time, if you send a FedEx envelope, a registered mail, it will not be put in the trash. Send your impact report in with a registered mail with DHL. It will go much further than an email. They don't send mail anymore. They don't go to meetings anymore, but they want people to respond to funding. And I'm telling them, not on my watch. Get out of your house. And then you want to take the Zoom when you're at your child's soccer game. You don't even set the ambiance. You don't want to get on camera. You're not even camera ready. How are you funding ready? These are the basics. We have to catch ourselves and unlearn some of the things we have taken on from the times of the lockdown that have made us antisocial fundraisers. Fundraisers are relationship building people. How are you an antisocial executive director? If you cannot go and tell somebody in person about the impact of your work, there is nothing me and ChatGPT can cook up to help your case. You cannot be helped. So help me help you. They don't want to, people have not dressed from the waist down. I don't know if people don't fit their pants anymore. I do not know where the issue is, but it is across the board. Nobody wants to leave their house. Sorry, guys. That is one that really bothers me.
I think from the reactions in the side, you've hit the nail on the head.
Yes, people need to go back outside, as somebody in the chat rightfully mentioned. So Audrey had a question, but Audrey, I want to say you asked your question after that question had been thoroughly discussed. So I hope that when you get the recording, that question you asked about what approaches have you found most effective in enabling African-led conservation organizations to mobilize sustainable funding amid evolving global donor priorities. Although we did not answer it for your sector specifically, we did answer it in a broader sense, and I believe you'll find value when you listen to the recording. So Audrey, I didn't want you to think we skipped your question, but for the sake of time, I do want to reassure you that it was addressed, and you will find it in the recording. Emmanuel brings up a very good question about research. How can organizations effectively translate research findings into compelling messages that attract funders without oversimplifying data? This is very important. What is the role of research in our field? What are the bodies we have come to know to be trusted for research about philanthropic trends, about sector-specific successes, and how can we use that research in our narratives to compel our funders to support us? Who would like to take that on about research?
Can I just clarify the question? I might take the question if I understand it correctly.
Sure.
Is the question about how do we translate research, for example, in terms of a technical project in a university into a snippet that's of interest to a funder? Or is it how we use the data sector-wide?
I want to say, because unless Emmanuel is on the call and wants to specify because it was their question, but I read it as the research of the trends of our sector, maybe. So it could go both ways. Emmanuel, are you still on the call? Maybe they're not.
I could take a stab at it.
Okay.
Well, I could tell you how I use research myself. So there's a research from the West Africa Civil Society Institute on the capacity needs of NGOs across West and Central Africa. So they interviewed about 500 plus organizations or nonprofit professionals across like 18 countries in the region. And the whole idea was just like, what are the top needs for them in terms of their organizations and all of that. And of course, fundraising was the top one there. But in terms of how I used it for, or what I think, how we can interpret industry trends. So for me as a consultant, what I found when they broke down, they all said like 92% were like fundraising and resource mobilization is a major headache here in West and Central Africa. But when they now broke it down in terms of what are the fundraising issues itself, what I found was corporate partnerships was the thing that they were, in terms of like what their current fundraising practices were like. I discovered that corporate partnerships was the major challenge for them, as much as only about 5% of West and Central African NGO professionals or NGOs were taking advantage of corporate partnerships in terms of how they mobilize resources. And that for me, as a consultant, just kind of really showed a gap that I have been working very, very hard to be able to fill across both French-speaking and English-speaking West and Central Africa, in terms of how I can provide that enlightenment for organizations, help guide them in the right path in terms of what businesses are looking for, what the opportunities are with companies, and then also how NGOs can mitigate the risk of partnering with businesses and how we can have like win-win situations eventually. So if the question is about sector-wide trends, I think, and then how we can influence donors, I think research is coming out steadily. A lot of organizations are producing stuff across the African continent. I like Epic Africa a lot. They're based in Senegal, and they're constantly they constantly have a pulse on what the sector is doing and things that are coming out. They did one last year, and I think it was continental wide on the impact of the funding freeze on African organizations, on African NGOs. And then that research is out there, all of this kind of stuff that's coming out there. I think what we can do as maybe consultants and thought leaders and also like nonprofit execs is make sense of that research in a way that kind of has and create like actionable points for the donors to be able to to take advantage of, really, to hopefully be able to change or modify practices concerning fundraising. So for instance, now I'm leading a study that is funded, I'm looking at the Africa component of a study that is funded by Gates Foundation. And the idea is how we want to capture the experiences of local actors, CBOs, networks, local networks, NGOs, want to capture their experiences interacting with international actors like donors, INGOs, UN agencies, and that survey is still on right now. I think I'll put it in the chat for more Kenyan nonprofits and East African nonprofits to fill it. But the whole idea of the research is eventually, and we did one about 10 years ago, just at the onset of localization and shift the power, and that was in 2016. And then right now, this is like a 10-year follow-up study to find out what really has changed in terms of localization and shifting the power, particularly in terms of funding, partnerships, and capacity strengthening. The whole idea is that eventually the findings from there would be used to help shape Gates Foundation internal localization programming, and hopefully also it can be used as like an advocacy tool for Gates to kind of lead the charge in mobilizing other like-minded foundations, particularly now that that funding from institutional donors, at least governments and UN agencies, is kind of like on the low. We hope that it would serve as a rallying point for us to hopefully begin putting in place really helpful modalities that help shift the power and shift the needle in terms of localization, particularly when it comes to fundraising. So I think it's just really, the research is out there. There's no lack of it. African generated research. We need to start making sense of it in very short bullet points, and then engaging with maybe donors in those kind of East Africa Philanthropy Network conferences, African Philanthropy Forums, where we meet with them and then say, this is what the data is showing, this is what you need to change, and let's start little by little. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Awel. Beatrice, I see your question, but we have come to the point of our program where the panelists would need to give their final remarks. There is never enough time for these conversations, and I extend my sincere gratitude to KAFP for providing this platform where people can have accessibility to learn from all these experts. So thank you, and I know this is the first coffee talk of the year, so there will be more to come. And please all make sure that you go in the chat and fill out the questionnaire to give feedback to the KFP team. They work very hard behind the scenes to make sure that these events are successful. So please, show them your appreciation by giving them some feedback so that they know what is going well and where they have room for improvement. Beatrice, because you had your hand up, please start us off with final remarks, please, and then we'll go around the table and then kick it back to the KFP team for closing remarks.
Yeah. So I think my takeaway number one is also let's look at our beneficiaries as investors and shareholders in their own program. So we have to bring them to that level as well, where if we're not there, then they can also have the opportunity, the space, the agency to speak to directly to the donor so that their aspirations can also be felt. Because I think sometimes we forget that even though they're beneficiaries, they're investors and they're shareholders in the process. So bring them further up to that discussion point and that place in the table, and meet folks where they are. For me, I think I'll just finish out by saying collaboration and its value cycles. We have to look at those two and merge those two and figure out how we can reorganize ourselves, as Wilke had said at the start, to get to come up with a better point of purpose and clarity of action going forward. And I think that's the most important thing, is action going forward. So for me, it's collaboration, action, and bringing our beneficiaries up to a point where they are seen as investors and shareholders as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Vileke, your final remarks?
Thanks very much, and thanks for a really interesting dialogue. I really loved it. Final remarks. Maybe one thing, a lot of questions here raised. There are a lot of best practice examples from the African continent. So if okay, I will share in the chat later a link to our global community platform, which is free available with all the resources out there, on how to do localized fundraising, how to get fundraising representation on your board, how to build relationships, all based on African inputs, because there is a dedicated Africa group on there. So very happy to share that. On a more broader level, when I look at the global level, one thing that we definitely see at Resource Alliance around innovation and, in a way, agility and looking at new solutions, which is definitely coming from the African continent. So where in the past a lot of work learning went initially from global north to global south, then we saw a lot west, east, east, west, Kenya, Brazil, India exchanges. What we see happening at the moment is actually that the UK, Europe, and US are really keen in understanding how do you build social enterprises, how do you diversify your income sources beyond fundraising into new financial models, and a lot of new practices, especially also on grassroots level. How do you do community fundraising? What means community fundraising, other than simply asking, please send me your money? We turn you kind of into an ATM account, so that you give on money instead of becoming a supporter. All of that, I think, is very crucial at the moment, and there we can learn a lot from what is happening on the African continent. Thanks.
Thank you very, very much. Allwell, parting remarks?
Thank you. So I want to advise African NGOs over the next couple of years to invest in going for major gifts from both traditional and non-traditional donors. So I'm currently creating a 3-year fundraising strategy for a Nairobi nonprofit, and that's the major thing I'm emphasizing. you need to be bold when you're asking for money. You have to be able to ask for money that helps you deliver on your mission, and not on a particular project. For you to be that bold to make that kind of ask, ideally, you need to know what you want to achieve over the next couple of years. So basically, use your organizational strategic plan, what you want to achieve over the next 3 to 5 years, and use that as a template for making bold ask from both your current donors, whether they are foundations, or new donors that you can go out and find, whether they are companies, high net worth individuals, or or diaspora networks. That is the only way you're going to be able to get funding to really work, to really support your financial sustainability, help you invest for the long term, and hopefully begin to cover up those cuts that have been mentioned. You probably might have encountered last year with the drop in institutional funding from governments. That's what I would advise. So get creative and get bold in asking. Get bold at asking and looking for new sources.
Thank you very much, Alwell. Harvey,
Yeah,
final
good morning,
remarks?
and thank you everybody for having me on this morning. I wish I was going to say something more transformational, or but I think it's more about going back to basics, focusing on what you control. And I think there's 4 things you can do: the message and how you're tailoring it to the audience, so it's not just one size fits all. I think you need to be realistic about your plan and your goals, not just we need to get back to 100% when we lost 50% and we need to do it tomorrow. That's not going to work. I think you need, as Christine actually said, I think the landmark comment of the day was like how you engage your donors, like in person, in their office, in your office, on one of your sites, at seeing a project, not like this. And I know Zoom is a good way for this kind of a catch up, but not for asking somebody for 500,000 or $5 million. And then diversification. I think most people are, I think if they're very honest, are too reliant on too few donors. And when things shift, you're left in a very precarious position. So diversify now so you don't need to worry about it later. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yes, thank you so much. And I will just add as parting words, please continue to keep the why of what you do at the forefront, not the what so much, not the when so much. Why? Why are you doing what you're doing as an organization? And if you can answer that and deliver it in a way that shows strategy, like Allwell suggested, if you are strong in your why, you can know the what and the how for 3-year to 5-year strategic plan. And that goes a long way with building your funder trust. And I especially want to echo the importance of being specialized, being good at a thing. You will also attract top talent. When we talk about succession planning in my agency, we don't just look at succession planning on a standpoint of who's replacing who at retirement. Succession planning is also about retention of your human resource. You have no program without your program officers. You have no fund development team without your resource mobilization officers. Take care of your people. Professionally develop your people. Have a budget so that your staff can join organizations like KAFP, so that they can have community in the work that they're doing. Fundraising can be very lonely. How many fundraisers have, a best friend who also fundraises? You and I we didn't go to school to fundraise. Half of us just found ourselves here. Our stories of how we got here are very unique. We're unicorns in the ecosystem of charity work. So a lot of us, we don't have 3 fundraiser friends. You cannot count 3 fundraiser friends that you meet with for brunch. So please invest in the people working in your organization. Your logo is nice, your website is great, but if your people are emotionally, mentally, and psychologically bankrupt, you're not going to go far with sustainability. So I really feel that you need to pour into your staff. You need to appreciate them regularly, because they're the ones that are doing the work that show that very important return on investment to your investors and stakeholders, as Beatrice rightfully said. So please consider having a budget for that. You need to put your money where your staff, use it as fertilizer to grow your staff. You have to invest in your staff. I cannot stress that enough. If your staff have not seen the inside of a conference for 3 years, that is not okay. It is not okay. If you don't know when they're going through a personal milestone and celebrate them, you're not seeing them as a whole person. You're just transacting their gift, their time and treasure for your mission. And that's why they feel so replaceable in this sector, and they feel so disposable in this sector. And that's why there's a lot of transition in our staff. We want to retain our staff. We want to retain our boots on the ground officers. They're the ones that are carrying this mission on their back. They don't go to Zoom. Unfortunately, their work cannot be done on Zoom. They have to go and run the programs. They have to teach the kids. They have to feed the homeless. They're the ones doing the work. You get to sit on Zoom half dressed and schmooze people. It is not fair. So take care of that. That's what I would say. And please consider joining KFP or any other professional association in your region or globally like AFP, so that you can have community in this work. It can get lonely. Burnout is very high right now, and even appreciation is low in some organizations. So please find community so you don't have to pour from an empty cup. Thank you. Cindy, over to you.
Thank you so much, Christine, Harvey, Vileke, Allwell, Beatrice. I think we can all use the reaction emoji and give them all a well-deserved round of applause for a job very, very well done. So engaging. Wonderful nuggets to start us off in such a trying time, and just to get the encouragement that there is light at the end of the tunnel. We really, really appreciate you. If you check in the comment section, Brenda has been urging you to please fill in the Google form so that you can share your feedback on this session. The only way we can know what topics are of interest to you and the impact of our speakers is if you fill in the questionnaire. So please just take some time to fill it in. If you don't have time, just click on it so that it appears as a bar on your laptop or phone, and you could answer it later. We also have links where you can sign up if you'd like to be a member of the Kenya Association of Fundraising Professionals. Just to let you know, not all our coffee talks are free, but they are free for members moving forward. We just wanted to start the year with a bang so that we're all aligned in the same vision and mission. At this juncture, I'd like to invite our board chair, Maurice Omondi, to come in and give a vote of thanks and to add anything that I may have missed. Thank you.
Hello.
Yes, Maurice, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I just want to take this opportunity again to thank you very, very much, everyone. It's been a very, very engaging talk. I joined from the beginning, but I wasn't in a position to speak at that time. And I would like to thank you so much, Christine, for your energy. And everything you're saying was really getting, like you have to get out. Many of us, and Harvey, the way you say that, although people are talking about technology, in reality, it doesn't break relationships. So thank you so much, Christine, for being a great moderator. Thank you so much, Avi, for your reflections and sharing. Allwell, thank you very, very much. Vileke, thank you very, very much. Yesterday when I was speaking, having the other discussion about the manifesto for change, this is in reality the manifesto for change, in the sense that despite of the challenges that are happening in the globe, there's still an opportunity. And there is the hard stuff in terms of writing proposals, etc., but it cannot replace the relationship building. Thank you so much, Beatrice, also for sharing your own experience, and we really, really appreciate. And we're looking forward to engaging with you more and more as we go ahead. I also like to take this chance to thank our secretariat, Anne and Brenda, and the volunteers who work behind the scene to make this happen. And it's been very, very excellent. When you are thinking of how do you start the year, I think this one has worked out very, very well, and we want to really appreciate them. And also like to thank you, Cindy and Ruaida. There's Mike. They are one of the founding board members for the Kenya Association of Fundraising Professionals, Ruaida, and the other board members who are not able to come in today, but they are with us. And this wouldn't have been a success if there were no participants or listeners, because you are the most important people here. Others will just be speaking to ourselves. So thank you so much for everyone who joined in. And just want to, as Cindy has said, we have plenty of events, which I think Cindy are going to share more as we go along. And we'd like you to engage more and more. And I also like to just request if perhaps Vileke could, or I'm not so sure that Ruby is there, could share about some of the things happening at KFP. I mean at IFC. For example, there is a conference taking place in the course of the year and a few others. So Vileke, I don't know that Ruby is there, or you could just share a little bit about some of the things happening at Resource Alliance.
Yes, of course. Thanks very much, Maurice, and great seeing you again. Sometimes we don't see each other for months, and now we see each other day after day. Thanks very much, everyone, for still being here. Briefly on the Resource Alliance. The Resource Alliance is a global community of over 30,000 fundraisers, campaigners, change makers, and it's really built on sharing those best practices and new innovative solutions that are out there so that others can build on it. And it's not sharing only the idea, but also the person behind the idea, so that you really can ask questions to that respective person to say, hey, what is happening? What can we do? We organize, I shared a link already here in the chat around the Global Community Platform, where you can find a lot of resourcing, on all these topics that we are talking about, how to localize your fundraising, how to get your board more actively involved, etc. And there are a lot of specific African resources as well. So anyone who has innovative solutions, who has new best practices, feel free to share them with us. We are looking for speakers on the next International Fundraising Congress, which will be held in October. So please come and fill in, a speaker application form if you think that you have something interesting to share that might be relevant for other parts of the world. And often that is actually the case if you have a good practice. So we welcome everyone there. We have a couple of things lined up that are free available for everyone. Monthly keynotes. Every month there is a webinar, and yesterday we had a webinar about sharing this manifesto for change, and I will share the link in it, in which Maurice very actively participated on behalf of the Kenyan Association for Professionals, for fundraising professionals. We have also on the 13th of May, it's a little bit further away, but we have we have the Fundraising Online Conference, which is all around digital fundraising and digital mobilization, including AI. And yes, there are some examples where AI definitely accelerated income, although I have to admit as well, let's not make it AI is going to be the answer for everything, because that's definitely not the case yet, and maybe never. And we have, of course, IFC Online, which is later in October, which also will be free available. And just to give you an idea, through the digital fundraising online, we expect around 5,000 people there from over 125 countries. Last year, we had nearly 4,000. So you really will learn from examples that are happening across the globe. And actually, we had Kenyan representatives last year talking about how to mobilize people and how to mobilize funds, and how to build a supporter base around your organization, with a beautiful Kenyan example. So we would love to see you there, and we'd love to hear your input and your voices, which I hope we can share with the rest of the world. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Vileke. Actually, KFP was born out of a partnership with the Resource Alliance, so I thought that would be good to emphasize on that. And we also, just briefly, maybe in a few seconds, Avi, you could tell us the other things you do aside from this, just in a few seconds, so that people can get in touch with you for other engagements. And Allwell, you'll also have just a few minutes, and Christine. And then after that, I'll take back the microphone to Cindy. So, Avi.
Yeah, good morning. I've sent, I think in the chat, you'll be able to see my website. I do a lot of work globally. I work in London. I'm working in Uganda at the moment. I did a lot of work in Ethiopia, cross education, faith, and international development. So if you want to find out any more, you can just click on my website. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Allwell.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. So I'm enabling organizations in French-speaking and English-speaking African, across those platforms to be able to diversify their funding and ensure their financial sustainability. So I support with fundraising, strategic planning, donor mapping, connecting you to businesses that can fund you, and also building strong donor relationships. You can reach me every Monday on LinkedIn. I have a newsletter I send out by 11 a.m. in Nairobi every Monday. I've done that for the last 21 months, and it's called Fundraise with Allwell, where I share new insights around diversifying your funding and how you can get started on it. Other than that, you can also reach me via my LinkedIn profile that I put in the chat. Thank you so much. Always glad to be here at KFP.
Thank you very much, Beatrice, and then Christine.
Yeah, thank you, Morris, and thank you to the team, and very nice to meet my fellow panelists. It's always an honor to broaden one's Rolodex, so to speak. So, and to know that there's like-minded people all over the world. So Nature's Pitch, we support nano, like small green and blue entrepreneurs, and looking at African women in STEM, because we feel that African women in science have not been recognized. They do a lot. They're never published, they're never seen, they're never heard. And so what we try to do is elevate them, upskill them, take them to new learning heights, and then also use their science to inform what the entrepreneurs, the blue entrepreneurs and the green entrepreneurs are doing. So you tie in that whole cycle. So yeah, I'll put our website onto the chat, and I'm also on LinkedIn, and I'd love to be connected with everybody. I'm already connected with Harvey. That's great. So I'll look out for everyone else. But again, thank you very much. And I know as a continent and those of us in the sector, we can really shift the needle and bring Africa on top. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So as Christine also shares a bit, I'd like to every other participant who is in the call, you can just put your contact, your LinkedIn profile in the chat box so that you can engage. So Christine, maybe just briefly, and that after that, Cindy, you take over.
Yes, I have shared in the chat the website to our agency, Grounded in Equity. Our blog is very resourceful. We write a lot of different articles that can help you with challenges you may be facing. We try to keep up with what we are hearing and respond to it in a meaningful way. I've also put my personal LinkedIn and that of my agency. On Mondays, we have a segment called Money Monday, where we promote a grant every single Monday. So, I know there's hardship and barriers with accessing grant search softwares. Actually, it's a financial barrier. So, always check that out, because we post global and national grants, US based, but I do try to make sure we diversify those. What else can I say? My passion is in making sure that we as fundraisers have a voice. So I am always here to be a think tank, to be a sounding board to somebody who feels alone, who feels lonely in this work. And perhaps, you started as a program officer, and one day you were called in your boss's office and you were told, surprise, you are our new fundraiser. So I know how those things go. And so I am always open, because I know how those beginning stages of our journey as fundraisers can be challenging and lonely. And so Elsie, there's a link a little higher up in the chat. I'll try and find and duplicate it again for everybody. But yes, please feel free to reach out and connect.
So thank you very, very much. And now I'll hand it over to Cindy. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I think in the interest of time, I'm just going to skim through what we have in the offing for this year. And thank you so much to all our speakers just for putting in their LinkedIn and their details. Please make sure to click on that. I cannot reiterate how much I agree with Christine. We've become very sort of digital, complacent fundraisers, where we just want everything to be on our lap, go the extra effort and bond with somebody through the chat. So we've already had our Monday coffee talk, January coffee talk, as you can see on your screen. On February, it's so interesting that we had a bit of a preamble in terms of this topic. In February, we're going to talk about AI and the fundraiser. Is it ethical? Is it unethical? How can we use it? This is going to be a coffee talk, and it will be a free one. In March, earlier on I'd said April, but I've been corrected. It's in March, because this year Easter comes a bit early. In March, we're going to have our public sector resource mobilization workshop. So this is for those in the public sector who need to know how to raise money And the theme is fundraising for government agencies, so you need to know that. And as you can see with the charges, when you're a member of KFP, these workshops are heavily discounted for you. So please make sure you click on the button in the chat that asks you to sign up to be a member. That is in March. We will also have a virtual coffee talk for those who are not able to physically come for the public sector one. And it's storytelling that raises real money. If you're not findable, you're not fundable. And we still struggle a lot as fundraisers with our storytelling. And it's mainly for those program staff, social media managers who want to just elevate the social media status. Ladies and gentlemen, look, KFP members do not pay for paid coffee talks. If you're a non-member, you pay $7.50. So I hope this is an incentive for you to sign up as a KFP member. Our April coffee talk is going to be on domestic resource mobilization. Alwell mentioned very emphatically, and I do agree, a lot of the money is within the continent of Africa, but we are always looking west, and maybe it's time to learn how to raise money domestically. In May, we will have a restructuring of fundraising teams for results. This is now our in-person paid coffee talk. Christine, we have taken your advice, and not everything is going to be virtual. We're going to have an in-person coffee talk, and we are, please dress from the neck down, like you have been told. And let's meet at Swiss Lenan on the 7th, and let's chat about how we can restructure fundraising tools together. In May, I'm just going to scroll down to some of the highlights in the interest of time. We're going to have a second public sector workshop, but this is for board members, directors, and middle and top level management. You need buy-in from the people at the top. Fundraising is not just a docket that, a JD. If you don't get buy-in from management, it becomes a challenge. And we recognize that. And that is why we have 2 public sector workshops, one for the boots on ground and the second for the managers. After our coffee talks, moving to our IFC pop-up, I mentioned about it earlier on, we're really excited and privileged about the relationship we have with Resource Alliance and how we're able to tap into the International Fundraising Congress that happens every year in the Netherlands and have a summarized version of it here in Kenya. We'll communicate the venue, but just keep the date. It's going to be on 3rd of September. And finally, scrolling down to December, we will have our East Africa Resource Mobilization Workshop that will take part. That happens every end of year, and we'll communicate those dates to you. So thank you so much, everybody. And back to you, Maurice, to wrap up.
Actually, you've just finalized everything. I don't have any much more to share. Just to wish you all a great year ahead. Let's continue connecting, share contacts, share opportunities. Christine, thank you so much for those opportunities that you share. Perhaps maybe during the year, in the course of the year, we'll have a chance sometimes, maybe people to give feedback in terms of an opportunity that was shared, they were able to tap on it, and then we're able to celebrate together. Otherwise, we can call it a day and end it there. We'll keep the